That's bad, boy.
Show me how you feel. I consider myself, okay, that's a big deal. Well, you got the key to my heart, but you ain't gon' need it. Hurry, you open up my body and show me secrets you didn't know was inside. No need for me to lie. It's too big, it's too wide, it's too strong, it won't fit. It's too much, it's too tough. We talk like this 'cause he can make it up. He got a big ego, such a huge ego. I love his big ego. It's too much. You talk like this 'cause he can make it up. Usually I wonder, right now I don't choose. You could be with me or you could have it.
Hello viewers, it's James Kalm, your half-assed report of the guy on the bike. And we are on Orchard Street, and I'm going to drop in here to Perrotin and look at a show by Georges Mathieu. Stay tuned. We're talking about this rethinking about Georges Mathieu. Let's start out looking at this. Sumian, is that the title? 1951. This is oil on wood. And, well, I'd say this is one of the more painterly pieces in the show. It's 47 by 63. Okay. Go into the large ground floor gallery. Okay, well, look at this. You can pause and read this. It's pretty interesting stuff. Alexander Iolus. Okay. Come in and do a sweep to give you an idea of the installation. It's the three massive paintings. And they've got an interesting video that'll be droning on in the background. It's titled Mott Solemns. This is 98 by 236 inches, so that's 8 feet by, gosh, 21 feet, something like that. This is 1978. This might be one of the most recent pieces in the show. And, well, I think it's interesting in a couple of ways. One is that I think Mott usually used maybe 3 or 4 colors, so a lot of it is black, white, and red. But this is just black, white, and gray. And I'm not exactly sure how long Mathieu lived. He might have kept going for years And I'm starting to see some structures here. We've got like a pyramid form in the middle. Well, I was studying painting in the mid-70s. I ended up going and spending a couple of years in Europe and looking at art over there, visiting places like Paris, Berlin, Amsterdam, Vienna, Munich, and well, I think that Mathieu was probably fairly well respected and admired there for a couple of things. One of them was that, well, he just was an ambitious painter. I think also there's a kind of a French side to the of reestablishing the avant-garde that had been destroyed by World War II. And there were a whole group of people, you know, a lot of the French and Dutch artists that hadn't been totally subsumed by the National Socialists that sort of came to power after the war, and but they had a lot of work to do to kind of reestablish the cultural institutions and the heritage of the avant-garde that had been destroyed. Oh, this is a monster painting. This is titled Paris, Capital of the Arts. It's oil on canvas, 118 by 354 inches. So this is a very big painting. They talk about him. He didn't. They don't call what he was doing painting. They call it performing. And I'm thinking that there is a certain relationship between that and the action painters, and the idea that Harold Rosenberg put out in his essay, I think it was called The Action Painters, about painters no longer saw the canvas as a place where you would represent nature, but as a place where you would have an event occur. And in that way, I think Mathieu and his performances fit into that pretty snugly. But I think also that in a lot of ways he has kind of graphic tendencies that relate to the graffiti writers, strangely enough. You know, those people that came along probably 30 years later and started using the kind of swooping brush strokes, calligraphic styles of things to kind of accentuate the structures, the writing that they were doing. I think this part right here, this does look like the flourish of some royal person who was signing a declaration of something. Except I think that, well, as they always used to say, Mathieu would use his whole arm. This is not just your wrist or your up to your elbow. This is your whole arm. And in some of these, he was using very long brushes. One thing I did think that was kind of ironic is that he's gone in and he's painting little shadows in under some of the brush strokes, which relates to a whole kind of obscure art movement that was happening in New York in the mid-late 70s called abstract illusionism. Yeah, so Mathieu was very much aware of his kind of signature the dramatic gesture of what he was doing, and how that signature kind of existed as an effigy in its own right, something that was not really part of the canvas but kind of floated over the top of it. It's another big painting. It's titled The Victory of Denyen, 1963. It's 108 by 275. Okay, I think this is one of the better pieces in the show. I think for one thing is that this seems less rehearsed. You know, some of the pieces, like I was saying, have the character of a signature, but you have a lot of time to practice your signature, so you get all the lines and your horizontal versus vertical lines going. You know how to do it. This one looks a little more spontaneous. Also, I like the stained ground, so a lot of them just have a totally flat color background. This one has got a little staining. It's got a lot of staining. In the video that's droning on in the back, they actually have some scenes of him in Japan where he is painting on some of these on the ground and sort of pouring and crawling around and slushing things around with his legs and knees and things. They also make a point of comparing his work to Pollock and saying that whereas Pollock was always working on the floor and kind of walking around, that Mathieu made it a point of generally painting on these when they were propped up. So they were vertical, and he was in a lot of ways kind of dancing around in front of them. So the paintings were not painted, they were performed. And a lot of these he was doing actually on stages or in amphitheaters, and so you'd have an audience, and I'm sure he was probably playing up the dramatic aspects of him and, you know, the poor existential struggle of the artist and the slashing and painting and doing all that stuff. And I think that kind of showmanship wore thin pretty fast. Okay, Paris 26th, 1963. Probably people decided that was good for a little bit, but once you had done your performance, and I guess Yves Kline was doing something similar with his blue nudes, kind of splashing paint on them and then laying on the canvases and doing things like that. And I think there were some other people, you know, Franz Kline made a big deal of kind of painting with huge slashing strokes and would make the paintings look like they had happened in a couple of moments, when in fact they'd actually been planned out, and he had rehearsed a lot of that. But when I was studying, they thought this was all kind of kitsch, because it was playing too much on the melodrama, the spectacle, and performance and dance and all this other stuff, when serious painters should have just been painting. And this is exactly the kind of stuff that the minimalists hated. I mean, they were ready to take these people out and send them off into the wilderness. Okay, let's let's go upstairs and look at the rest of the show. Okay, well, we're up on the 3rd floor. We're going to continue with the Mathieu show. Come in and do a scan of the installation. Well, they don't have this one listed on the online guide. I would say this is probably about 48 by 36. Well, I like the quote as you come in here. It's Clement Greenberg is saying he thinks Georges Mathieu is maybe the strongest European painter at the time. I don't know when that was written, but could be. This is titled Entre le chic et le bohème, circa 1950. This is 28 by 45. And, well, I'm looking at this and thinking this is pretty fresh looking, although I think when you've got someone that is painting like Mathieu and everything is pretty raw, and then after it gets in the hands of institutions and museums and galleries and stuff, they have a tendency to restore this. So I wouldn't be surprised if this has been varnished, which probably wasn't the way that Mathieu would have liked the paintings to continue. This is homage to Louis XIV, 1957, 38 by 76. A lot of these, I guess, mid-period pieces are pretty sparse, and well, they talk about him developing a style called tubism, I guess, which is in opposition to Leger, who was one of the tubists as opposed to the cubists. They're talking about him developing a technique called tubism, in which he would squirt the paint right out of the tubes. And I was listening to a little video program downstairs, and they were talking about one of his performances. He went through 800 tubes of paint on some huge piece that he was performing. Untitled, circa 1952. Okay, I like this one because this still looks pretty raw. They also kind of focus in on the fact that he was performing these pieces pretty spontaneously, but I'm looking at the grounds and thinking that he or someone would have to spend some time at least preparing and painting the ground. Some of these are on various colored, solid colored fields. Other ones are on grounds that have been stained and kind of highlighted in certain areas. See, this one's got a little dust and stuff built up. This is the Battle of Jerboa, 1962. This is 77 by 70. Actually, I think this is maybe one of my favorite pieces in the show. For one thing, he's gotten into a little more color. kind of like the splashy, the drippy side of this. I guess this is 1962. Well, I think when I was going to school studying painting, they kind of, and even when I was in Europe studying over there, Mathieu was kind of, well, looked at as a showman, a kind of a showboater, and as far as the actual painting goes, people admitted that he was slinging the paint and doing a lot of things like that that related to some of the other people, like the Cobra painters and maybe even some of the, I think they call them Natasha's, the touch painters, Solange and some of those people. But he was kind of disparaged like Salvador Dali. And people were saying if he was a serious painter, and I guess this comes from the kind of the New York school of abstract expressionism and the action painters, and that if he was serious, he wouldn't have to be a showman, that he would just be kind of agonizingly going over and making these works for himself, instead of having to go and put on a show and be a performer. This is Georges des Pains Forme l'Ordre du Temple, 1958. I think this is probably a really good example of his kind of standard mature style piece. You know, you've basically got your three colors, black and white and red. I studied with Knox Martin, and one of his lines was that those are the painter's colors. I guess this may even go back to like ancient Greek thinking that those are the three colors you need to create most of the things, are the mixtures of those colors. Of course, that leaves out the greens and the yellows and blues. This is titled First Avenue, 1957. Collection of the Albert Knox Art Gallery, Buffalo, New York. Gift of Seymour H. Knox, 1958. So, gosh, I wonder if George came to New York. Probably. Okay, so, yeah, what looks like a black ground, I think, is actually maybe tinted. Oh, it does say here, New York, October 9th, 1957. Interesting, okay. Well, I was saying this ground looks like it's black, but I think it's actually been tinted with some dark blue. And you can actually see some of that kind of bleeding through in his washy shot of white. Oh, they talk about one of the massive paintings. It might be one of the ones that are downstairs in the lobby that he worked on and got it. This is like a 7 by 15 or 18 foot painting. He finished it in an hour and a half or something like that, as if that was a some kind of artistic standard. Duel de Marais, Dubois, 1955. There's also a lot of things that have the characteristics of calligraphy, and talking about Mathieu was very influential for the Gutai painters, the Japanese kind of performance artists. This is 37 by 51. Simon Conti de Crepé, 1959. It's 39 by 65. I'm also looking at some of these and thinking that if you took away the little scribbling calligraphy flourishes and just looked at the blocks of his composition, that they kind of relate to some of the things that Nicolas Destager was doing about the same time. And, okay, so he's using a flat palette knife, spatula. Actually, I kind of like the mixing it up with his implements. So he's got some stuff he splashes on with the brush. He's got things that he squeezes out with the tubes, and he's got some slabs of paint that he lays on with a fat putty knife or palette knife. And again, it's just the white, black, and red. Marie de René du Fils de Crovy, 1959. Oh gosh, there are some kind of subtle things happening there. There's a certain dark purple, the dioxazine purple kind of coming through in some of these scrapes or slashes with his palette knife. I'm also thinking that when you put these things in frames, it's kind of like looking at a body in a coffin. It's just not the same as a living person somehow. Kind of puts it into a historical mausoleum-like enclosure. Port Royal, 1964. It's 25 by 45 inches. Well, I think he does a pretty good job of using these squibbed lines that he's squeezing out of the tubes of paint to get across a linear, as I was saying, kind of a textual or graphic quality. But yeah, he only goes in for the paint, the slabs, the blocks of paint in kind of special areas that he wants to kind of block in a certain way. And compositionally, I think it kind of changes this. And a lot of these pieces always have this figure in the center of the canvas. So there's always the foreground, the scribbling, and then the background. He doesn't integrate the ground into the painting so much. Okay, we're going to look at the last one here on the top floor. La bulla, omne datum optimum, 1958. Okay, this is a pretty big painting. This is 75 and 9/16 by 157. It's about 6.5 by 14 feet, something like this. And I say in many ways, this is probably the sparsest piece in the show. So we've got our white ground, and then it looks like basically a couple of gestural splats, a little slash, and then our little choreographed squiggle across the bottom. And it's all in, I would say that's probably cadmium red medium. So there are a few people that are kind of the masters of the splash. I think Mathieu is one of them. I wonder if some of this has been touched up a little bit. It's interesting. And in the video they were showing downstairs, he actually worked on a lot of these with brushes that had a 4-foot, 5-foot handle on them. So he was swinging them around like a tennis racket or a casting with a fly rod or something. This has been James Kalm reporting on Georges Mathieu here at Perrotin on Orchard Street. You can like this, share, subscribe, link it up to all your social media sites, and you can leave your thoughts, ideas, comments, criticisms, and reviews below. But as always, we just ask you to say, thank you, Kate. Whoa!
Come on!
Thank you.
Thank you.
Second set.
Yeah, we're just gonna keep the music going. Just